So the one thing actually is this is probably the lowest number of slides that we have in any deck. So apart from that first bit, it's literally pretty much one slide per session. So the actual main things will be demos. There's a few exceptions, but it's pretty much a slide per shot. And then we'll go into the technologies, show you through them. As I say, it will be fairly high level in that sense, but please do ask questions. But really, it's just to kind of give you a flavour of the different mixes of how these technologies fit. As I say, if there's anything that's potentially of interest, it's certainly easy to get a proper technical guy, but also a more detailed session for the bits and pieces. So, protection of the front door. Really, it starts, as we talked around, is how do we try and aim to simplify and secure access to resources. So this would be with respect to what Microsoft refer to as an Azure AD Premium. So this is part of an E3 component of the EM&S suite, and I'll explain that at the end as to what E3, 5 and other stuff means. But what Azure AD Premium kind of comes into the mix is to really start to deliver you that capability around single sign-on for applications, and that can be both kind of cloud apps, kind of on-premise applications, as well as a range of other bits and pieces, like depending on how you present that. As well as adding then quite in a fairly simple and easy way, multi-factor authentication, different levels of conditional access and support around how you control access to a range of different services or certainly your applications and data. There's a capability within the Azure AD Premium that's called AD App Proxy, which is around also how you can protect internal or again kind of either intranet sites or something that is a web-based type service that may be based within your kind of local internal domain, but you want to present that externally to users, to partners. And we've seen actually people use this to present their own services back to their internal users, quite simply because the Azure AD Premium gives you that ability, or Azure AD, of having a greater level of intelligence, monitoring of what users are doing, what kind of authentications, log-on attempts, all that type of stuff, which can be quite difficult to get in a visual and in a better representative way without crunching logs and all this type of stuff. So again, this Azure AD App Proxy side allows you to present those applications. We'll show that looks like, and add in things like single sign-on or multi-factor authentication in a pretty easy way. So then actually, you can, in a few clicks, start to enable pretty highly secure access to services. That kind of is extended if we start to look at actually providing kind of what we would kind of almost refer to as that kind of ideally more inherent security to the device. So Windows 10 is certainly Microsoft has really stepped up to try and increase the capabilities within that. There are dependencies on some of the hardware, but actually based on a lot of the hardware that's available to date, it's going to be very common. And we see with changes within some of the vendors, it's going to be pushing towards Windows 10 anyway, because a lot of the new chipsets and other bits and pieces from Intel are forcing users to say we can't actually go lower than Windows 10. Now, the aspect here is leveraging some of the kind of the core security features, but also starting to go into some of the more virtualization pieces, but preventing secure boot to ensure that actually at boot level you can't inject kind of a malicious step within our code to kind of before your security typical technologies will turn on, just kind of take that action. Preventing malicious code running on devices. So this is something called Device Guard. So it's a more advanced version of what would have been like App Blocker, or effectively something to prevent certain applications from running. And this is kind of used to meet aspects around trying to protect against zero-day threats. So you effectively whitelist the type of applications that you want to allow to run on your desktop environment. So then if someone tries to execute a code set that isn't approved, it won't run. So simply then things like ransomware or other bits and pieces, it's trying to introduce that level of protection to stop that activity. And then Windows Hello. Windows Hello is actually kind of commonly thought of as that takes the picture of your face and lets you log on from that. And yes, it does, and it's actually pretty useful. That has some dependencies in hardware as always, but Windows Hello is more of the framework that Microsoft's using to add in the different ways of authentication, whether that be extended token-based side for the kind of the RSA type tokens and other things that people are used to, or using the authenticator apps that will be on your phones, whether they be Android, kind of iOS, and Windows, but iOS or Android typically, and adding that kind of capability that a lot of the new phone devices are bringing biometrics built into it, so you can also kind of add and extend that. So Windows Hello is more around kind of trying to bring in a simple way or a framework that allows you to add biometrics or other authentication types and let that kind of be your experience and management of how users log on. And something that actually is brought then more into the E5 component, but a bit of a mix with some of the AD Premium bits, is Azure AD Premium P2, which really brings through a capability which is called privileged identity. Kind of in terms of what that effectively is Microsoft has this ever-growing approach of just in or just enough of. And you see this in the Windows Server technologies, you see this in a range of different bits and pieces, so just-in-time administration, just enough credentials, just enough of this. What the concept here is that, we all have probably far too many kind of administrators and other bits and pieces within our environment. It's actually hard to say who should or who shouldn't, because actually quite typically, the people will need it, but they won't need it for the full length of the month, so they're permanently assigned. The privileged identity is bringing in a capability to say, well, actually, I'd like to be able to offer a simple process that our IT or our appropriate users that want admin or should have admin can request it for a period of time that I determine to be appropriate for that. And because that's managed then at the system side, it means that you are significantly reducing the potential that if someone does get a compromised credential on that whole lateral movement type side, they've got a much lower chance of being able to access into a privileged identity within your environment. So again, fairly significantly curing this threat protection.
Just on that one, can you log the requests that people make to?
Yes, yeah, so you can get notifications. Show you how that works from a cloud-based version of that. They do also have the Microsoft Identity Manager, which is the on-prem version of this, which actually is included within the E3. So the cloud-based version is part of E5, but the MIM is an on-prem version of that. So it gives you the same capabilities for your on-premise, doesn't necessarily extend into the cloud side. You can set them up in hybrid, because MIM has some further capabilities to integrate into a lot of different application sets, because it's a pretty big product in its own right. But yeah, you get a lot of reporting, but the cloud-based version now is certainly doing a lot more power. All along at the time, MIM was brought in when people wanted to add password reset into kind of the log-on screen, the Gina type side. That's still the case if you want to have it at that log-on side. The password reset service within the Azure has got better, as it's now created account unlock, but it's still a web-based service, so you still need to log on to an individual web page. Now they can do that from basically any device in that sense, so because they're logon.microsoft page or your authentication page, depending on how you set it up. But yeah, MIM is certainly still getting put into customers, but it's typically for either integration into other type of credential management or kind of specialist systems to do identity and provisioning, as well as the password Gina is actually a pretty common one around. I want it in the log-on screen, but you get the actual licensing for that within the E3 component. And of course, it's, as obviously say, you get the monitoring and response type of information provided back with these. A big part of the Microsoft stuff is to try and surface as much intelligence and information back to you guys as possible. And they're bringing this a lot into almost a consolidated dashboard with their Azure Security Center to try and start to feed again a lot of information into that. So, unless there's any questions on those bits, we can certainly dive. And as I say, ask questions as we go through. Just as a, I'm going to do probably a shocking job of explaining Azure AD now, but we're going to go through
slides afterwards. So we'll get the slides afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And we'll put the videos and stuff up online. Maybe this session we've recorded each of the sessions, so we'll get the content for you available. Absolutely. So we'll go through a few bits and pieces just to show you some of these technologies. As I say, ask questions as we go through. As probably a bad way of explaining this, but let's see how I do. The Azure AD side is that starting point. So, we're talking about that kind of protection at the front door. It's your gateway to start to leverage a lot of the Microsoft capabilities and services. So we consider that's your AD, got all your domains, your forest, other bits and pieces on-prem, and it's got your user's identity and information for you there. You can then add your Azure AD, and that starts to then give you the ability to create additional accounts for access to cloud services. You can have those kind of completely separated, and you tend to see the difference between that as you kind of on-prem AD, you have your domain at poweron.com, or your Azure AD, you pretty much typically signify that at a base level because you'll see that .onmicrosoft.com. Now you can edit that, make that look the way that you want. One of the things that Microsoft doesn't tend to say too often to users is actually when you sign up for the actual Microsoft cloud services like Office 365, you will have an Azure AD, because sometimes it's considered that, well, I'm on Office 365. Yes, but the background identity and management for that is within the actual cloud service. And if you think that, at the starting point, if you're wanting to do work with, say, external providers, or you wanted to provide access into, maybe certain services that you have stored or shared within the cloud, you can add external users into your Azure AD, and they will not have then a localized account within your Active Directory. So it does give you an initial level of set to be able to kind of provide access to the front door, but not necessarily the back door, right, in terms of your actual on-premise AD. Of course, if you want to try and make that simplified for your on-premise users, you can set up something that's called AD Connect. It's a very simple tooling that you can actually do, a pretty light server. It basically just kind of synchronizes your kind of user's AD and can synchronize that kind of password hash as well to kind of support single sign-on aspects for applications and services for your on-prem users. It is really quite simple. They're trying to kind of convert or kind of merge as much of these as possible. So it's disaster recovery is reinstall it, because it's a few clicks and you can get going basically in terms of the actual service. What we do also tend to see though is users starting to bring through that kind of concept of ADFS as well, so the Active Directory Federation Services. So this isn't a new technology; it's been around for like 10 years or so. The whole Federation Trust, and it's not a synchronization tool. It's kind of more of a an authentication management side. So if you want to then have the ability, rather than using the Microsoft service to do the authentication, and you want the service to be written from your side, ADFS will then change the interaction to say that actually they authenticate my service first, which then pushes out necessarily to the actual kind of Azure services and grants access that way. So just to kind of show that in a little bit more in terms of what does that actually mean. So you can kind of take these quite far actually. Actually would come up on screen. So we are on ADFS, and you'll see that the adfs.com at Power and Platforms is that kind of typical site, because I've entered that through. But actually, if I was just on a standard logon page, you can see that just get the logon.microsoft.com. So it's the different kind of URL in terms of coming through to where the actual kind of authentication be driven. And he did this as a joke domain, but someone's actually registered this. But you can also see that you can still use primary, because when it's doing it, it's just checking the second half, and you see the little dots. But it's still going through an Azure AD logon, as it's still the logon.microsoft.com. Now, one of the actual bits that we did quite a while ago now was for an NHS organisation. And so this was starting to say, well, they had a challenge around spending quite a lot of money on RSA tokens, around 100,000 a year approximately, and they wanted a service to actually support removing that and simplifying the process. However, the challenge, of course, was back then. The typical kind of softer factor token sometimes would be a challenging thing to kind of prove its levels of security. Sometimes it was considered 1.5 times or other bits and pieces. So this was West Midlands Ambulance Service. So you can see this is actually still an ADFS, but kind of a redirected logon, so it's managed by their side in terms of that. And this is a fairly customized web page for them, and it's still in use today, even after 7 years of that. So type the different username. But if I wanted to go in and actually type the password to that, the keyboard is disabled. If it was a kind of on-screen keyboard or other things, equally it wouldn't work. So if I want to actually enter then the password for this, you need to actually go through to kind of the keyboard that's being presented through with this. Now, what you can start to see is actually, that's both prevented initially a key logging, but this keyboard is also scrambled. And the keyboard is scrambled each time. So the actual side of things, it's both preventing a keylogger monitoring for entering the password manually, but also it's preventing XY coordinate mapping type attacks as well in terms of kind of capturing that. So what that kind of gave to West Midlands was a way of saying, well, actually this is a pretty secure way of being able to allow our users to gain access to our services, because they have to use this kind of logon page, and it's going to come through. Now, this was 7 years ago. There are obviously more advanced ways of doing this now and other bits and pieces. But actually, that was like 2 days, a bit of JavaScript and a bit of consultancy work to support it out. And it then effectively paid for their entire move to their Office 365, or what was BPOS, that kind of side of things, because of the money they saved purely on the actual RSA tokens. So it's, as I say, you can certainly do quite a bit with the different ways of how this service works, but it's allowing you to kind of really kind of bring in that kind of primary frontline access and support into how you potentially gain connections and access to that. So we then look at, say, different sides like the single sign-on. So if I, go through and just log on to my standard My Apps, are you Office 365 users today? Yeah. So you'll be familiar then with this type of portal. In terms of that, you start to see a range of the different standard apps as well as then other applications that have been added into the mix. Both things that will exist within, say, the pre-approved app catalog. So Microsoft like 2,800 or 2,900 roughly nowadays. But also we start to see other bits and pieces, like we do quite a bit of work with different government entities and things, so the G-Cloud Digital Marketplace. And it's very simple to add different web pages or different services where even if it's not in the catalog, as long as it's kind of like a SAML-based authentication side, enter the URL and add in the details. You can then start to assign that out either to individual users and let them log on from their side, or you can actually pre-provide the credentials if you want single sign-on so that you manage the access to those. So if you've got users that are needing to gain access to partner organizations, partner services where accounts need to be managed and you want to gain control, then you can start to use this as a pretty effective way of kind of quickly offering that out. Nice thing, of course, about that is if your users ever tend to leave the organization, disabling their AD account disables all their access to the different side. The usual one we pick on with that is, say, marketing. So Twitter, it's a high profile and obviously fairly visible side of how your business will very likely engage with the market today. It's if you get a disgruntled person within, say, an exit process, then they could do something pretty easily that would have a fairly high impact to your organization. And because Twitter's obviously your credentials are managed externally, and if you ever have to try and do any changes to that, Twitter is a pretty painful process to do that if you've ever tried to communicate with their internal ops teams. Then ideally you want to try and give a way where the single sign-on can be managed in a simple process. If I just click on the Twitter account, then you start to see it's just going through the login side, and the Wi-Fi is pretty slow in here, so apologies. And then it redirects this through. And you see it's entered in the credentials on my behalf, and all done. So I have no idea what our Twitter accounts or other bits and pieces would be from a direct side. So that's managed. It's a pretty simple and easy process. You get presented with a common My Apps portal. Again, the users can access and log on to that from anywhere. If they do start to use obviously email services or other bits and pieces from Microsoft, equally, this will be their launch point. So even if they're not, it's still a fairly easy kind of common thing that they can start to get used to. But the more, if you are becoming more Office 365 and continuing to use that, it'll just be that common interface and you can start to access. So, I can start to fairly easily add, kind of more pre-approved or authenticated apps in the sense of the ones that Microsoft have already worked with, or pretty simply start to add in other services into the mix with that.
In terms of that, what license level do you need to be at? Or what version of Azure AD do you need to be at?
So that's a good question. So actually, even at a free level, you get something called Azure Basic. That still actually comes with a level of single sign-on for what would be classified as their primary apps. That includes actually things like Salesforce. There's like 10 approved applications at a basic level. That has no cost.
Yeah.
To do that in terms of then the extended single sign-on, be able to kind of budget out, that would be Azure AD Premium P1, which would be as part of the E3 component. And I'm happy to go through the licensing and explain how that works. But Azure AD Premium P1, which you can buy as a standalone service, you don't have to buy the bundles, or it will be part of what's referred to now as the EM&S suite, or the Enterprise Mobility and Security, and it's in the E3 component of that. So you can see a bunch of different bits and pieces in there. Now, I mentioned also the side where you can start to add in this kind of access to a web application. Now you can see I've got something there called IT Service. If I jump into our Azure portal, I'll just close that for a second, and I'm going to delete that service. I should have done it before, to be fair. Right. So the Azure AD app, so that IT Service is our internal IT service portal. It's not as secure as a HTTP for an internal access, but it's just a web-based intranet page basically. So I can go into our Azure AD. So what you will see in a common theme throughout the course of all the demos today is pretty much most of the stuff now is in the Azure portal, as they're moving that not necessarily a single pane of glass per se, but certainly a single management console, ideally for as much of their stuff as possible. Now that's not 100% true as they buy a lot of products, right? But it is continually being the place. So Intune is now in here, whereas Intune used to be on a single, a Silverlight portal. And you know, a lot of them, the Azure management capabilities. MFA is still actually kind of a bit of a blur between the old portal and the new, but we'll show that through as we go. So if I go into the enterprise application side, you'll see that it's got a whole bunch of different applications in there, and it's giving me visibility of who's signing into what and different side of things like that. If I go into the actual all applications side, let me just remove that IT service. Twice. The Wi-Fi was slow yesterday, so I got a bit click happy. So just removed that from my portal. So if I go back to just my all application side. So you can start to see in here that this is where I'm managing any of what would be classified as their enterprise apps, or pretty much anything where you're going to be managing it with an Azure AD account. So that can be a range of mix of, you know, kind of different online services, as well as ones that we presented to it, and as well as third parties that we may have introduced kind of an SSO kind of agreement and single sign-on type side. So, you know, different bits and pieces. I can quickly go into add a new application to that. I get a wide range of the current catalog. So this is all the apps that Microsoft have already pre-worked with to kind of ensure that there's an integration point. And but you know, the Azure AD app side from a single sign-on does have a lot of different support for different authentication protocols. So you can see you can still do things like you're developing on-premise applications. So you can use this to sign into a wide range of stuff. If it's more for on-premise kind of native apps, there is some dev work to do to start to do that, but you know, it does give you support to go further. So it isn't necessarily just limited to wherever other bits, but you know, you can very quickly start to register on-premises, non-gallery type applications and other bits and pieces. So if I go into an on-premises type app that I'm creating and say I want to add in my IT service desk, so I'll go IT service. And I grab our internal URL, and I can just basically put that in. You see it's a poweron.local, just HTTP. I can edit different things if I want. I'll just leave it at the standard. And you can do pre-authentication, do pass-through, or I can do an AD challenge for that. And I just pretty much click add on that. Now, AD App Proxy in this sense is, again, just a relatively speaking light server that you would install on premise, and then that's going to give you the ability to start to do this type of capability because it supports a secure tunneling between the Azure AD and your on-premise side. So, see that we've now done that, so I can then start to assign a user for testing. And so this gives me the ability to assign this to users, groups, depending on how I want to do it. You know, if I wanted to assign it to a group, that didn't work. Why did it not work? Oh, right, because I haven't actually assigned it to me. Being stupid. So go into add an assignment to the actual application, and then can start to go through and point of view of inviting. So a lot of our groups start with PON, and you can start to see I could assign it to a co-op users or any different type of group that you want to effectively set up in the traditional way of AD groups, like 365 groups, all that kind of good stuff. Or just assign it to myself. Ooh, if I can spell my own name right. And you can see actually, you know, that's me, but also, you know, you can see we do actually work with externals that are also part of this in terms of our managed AD. So I just select that, and then I'm just going to refresh this to get rid of the old thing. And then I can add that assignment. So I removed the old one, and fingers crossed, as long as the demo piece is with me, that should disappear in a second, and then, well, once I refresh it, and a new one that will be a lowercase t will appear. There we go. So you can see that actually within a matter of moments, it's effectively removed the old app assignment that was there, just through the choice, and then re-added me the new app that I've added into the mix. And then, is this going to work? It was whinging at me yesterday because of the service connection. I should just be able to access through. It should give me an AD challenge. I should have done a Blue Peter moment. Here's what I said earlier. But fundamentally, what would happen if I probably put in the URL properly? Then it would effectively kind of start to kick through and just open up the actual IT service portal, and it would just present it as a standard web page, so it would just be the same intranet page. But what you do see is, as I say, through the actual application side, it is kind of securely wrapping that, and as I say, you can do pre-authentication, so they don't then get an AD challenge, but you can also likewise add in different levels of conditional access to that, to say, you know, for access to this application, you have to have, say, an MFA challenge, or the device needs to be of a compliant state, so I got the latest security updates and other bits and pieces on there. And there's a bunch of different conditional access and other bits that you can add into that. I'll check that and sort that out earlier because it was messing around yesterday. But Azure AD Proxy, as I say, we're starting to see that being used more commonly across all industries. You know, you see the common trends with vendors, even if the applications are still employed on premise, they're starting to bring that web portal-based interaction type side of things through. And so this is a nice way of being able to actually pretty quickly and easily add in you know, secure access to it, either from, you know, kind of adding in things like single sign-on, but also adding in then the next side, which will be starting to go through conditional access methods. So
in terms of that, when you shared it, at the minute you only shared it with yourself, so presumably nobody else has access to that. It's only the people that the administrator deliberately shares with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even show up on their portal.
No. No, it only show up on the portals that have been for the users that are either in the group or the associated users that you've done the assignment to. Right. Yeah, so that, my apps portal, I'm only seeing the things in my side that have been specifically assigned to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can, it's completely role-based access and all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to limit it, if you want to share it in any particular formats, then you absolutely have that control. It'd just be how you've got your group structures or your assignments that you're managing through.
And by you configuring that for local, land-based, local internet, whatever, you're saying that's what the Azure App Proxy is. It's nothing that you need to configure yourself by saying that I want to use my local domain. Yeah. That's automatically doing it.
Yeah, so as long as you've got an AD Connect and you effectively have a relatively, let's say, small server that needs to be added in for the AD App Proxy on premise, that then enables you to start to use this capability.
So it is a service that you need to run on-prem?
There is a connected server, effectively, yeah.
Even if you're already running, say, ADFS or...
So it would be effectively, it's a light additional server service that would be added to that mix, and then it gives you the capability to add the AD App Proxies for on-prem services. So it's pretty minimal. It's similar to the AD Connect in that sense, but yes, there is an extra install required on-prem to support this authentication method. So I then go into the additional access. So I actually just jump back in for a second into the old portal. So conditional access now is a grouping of both the multi-factor authentication side and also kind of other kind of identity access controls. So Microsoft use 4 main metrics in terms of how they provide support for access to services. So it would be location, user, device, and kind of policy. So you know, you can then set up different rulings depending on the type of user or who the user is, the locations where they're accessing from, if it's say a trusted IP or externally to a trusted IP. or if it's actually, say, the device itself is there in non-compliance from what your kind of policy set is, and different bits and pieces that you would do with in respect of that. Now let me just jump into the old portal, because normally I need to go through Azure Classic. Now, MFA from a configuration settings is still managed in the old Azure Classic portal, but it shouldn't be too long before this actually is transitioned through as well. So if you're familiar with Azure from previous, then this will be the kind of look and the feel that you'll have been used to. Again, just got the different views of different sort of things, and then I can go to configure my services. And you see, this is where I can start to do different things like the sign-on pages and other bits and pieces, and user password reset policies. And you've got the multi-factor, and actually if I go down the app proxy side where you manage the connectors and the other bits and pieces that we were mentioning before, previously for that. But if I just jumped into the actual MFA side. Now MFA is still included in the E3, this is an extended cost. If you're actually using for membership type organizations or extended kind of students, and you have kind of a B2B or B2C type models that you could also potentially leverage, which is then a much lower cost version of getting the Azure AD Premium features, but for say external bodies that you might be working with. But this gives me the kind of ways to set up kind of core aspects for the actual different side. I've just remembered we've set it on the wrong mobile, haven't we? The app password side, though, you can allow users to kind of create app passwords if you want, or just say, well, actually, I don't want them doing that. I can skip multi-factor things if they're using an ADFS-based authentication side, or I can start to skip it if they are within any of these IP address subnets. So in terms of, again, that ability to define what you would consider as trusted locations for your user entity, as well as then things like verification options that you want to provide when going through the MFA service. A lot of the time we tend to say not to use the call to phone, only on the basis really that because of the way the calls come through from the US, sometimes it can be off-putting for users because it has a +1 dial code basically. So sometimes it can be off-putting. But text messages to phone, notification through the mobile app, so the actual Authenticator app, or leveraging that through in terms of a text message, again, through the verification phone, again, to the mobile app. So text messages are pretty much the common one. If you've got a kind of a modern smartphone device, the Authenticator app is really quite solid, and you can use that, again, for the whole biometric kind of package.
And is there a cost to the text messages?
No. No, not from the point of view of this. What you can also do is based on when users log on to a device, so you can, if you're, say this is the first time you've seen this device, you can have an MFA challenge to that. But you can then have the service remember that device is either then approved or say every 60 days or another in terms of what you determine, you can enforce a refresh of that MFA challenge. So again, that idea of coming back to this setting base of what location they're coming from, what device they're coming from, you've got that ability to kind of go granular in terms of how you would support access to them. Now, I need to see what I can quickly. So, that's primarily where you would manage just the core settings of the multi-factor authentication side. So if I go back in then to an application. Oh, actually, if I go back. It's not that one. And go to conditional access policies for any of the apps that I want to set up. This then allows me to start to add in a new policy in terms of how I want to define that. Again, you can create policies for users, for groups. You can start to include or exclude depending on who you want to do. And again, the same type of process, right? You can just start to go in and add the different users that you want to be managed by this. Choose which cloud app I want to assign it to, so I can choose all apps, selected apps, again exclude certain apps. If you've got kind of ones that you consider to be pre-approved, I could go to the IT service if I wanted to and add that, or I could add in another one in terms of DocuSign. And then I can start to go through and decide, well, what conditions do I then want to apply to this? So primary conditions, we then started to look at what we talked around now. We've selected the users that we want this to be relevant to, so that's that kind of that first metric that we discussed, and then you kind of go through and start to include different types of platforms that you want to include from a device basis. So again, I can say, do I want to actually care about which device for this particular policy? Yes, I'll go actually, I want to include Windows devices, so primary aspects for that. Or I could choose my Androids, my iOS, if you felt that a certain device type was made less secure than others, or for whatever reasons that you feel that you want to choose a different device basis. Locations, I'm not so bothered about locations in this sense, but again, you could use that. You could do all locations, all trusted IP. You can again configure more different trusted locations depending on what you want to do, but fundamentally you can obviously use the location configuration set there. And then you can also start to consider how the access is coming through. So is it through a browser, is it through the actual mobile app, or bits and pieces. So you can start to go in and configure a range of different options or choices for the way that you would apply, first of all, the condition of access. And then depending on what you want to do based on that access profile, so based on that floor kind of piece that you've assigned, you can then start to say, well, actually, if they're accessing that format, I don't want them to have access at all. Or I'm happy to grant them access as long as they require go through an MFA challenge for that. Or they need to be a domain joined device. And you can choose to say and set these up depending on different policies, different apps. But fundamentally, you get a good level of support that you may want to do. And then sessions, another side. So it really depends on how you want to do it in terms of whether you want to put any additional controls for enforced restrictions for the app, and then it would just be a matter of enabling that policy and clicking create. And then I've stopped myself using DocuSign without going through the NFA challenge, right? And that policy would then effectively take effect. And again, if I then a little later went through and tried to click on the DocuSign thing, it would then challenge me to say, well, actually, if you want to authenticate through this, we're going to do an MFA challenge for you. It might just take a few moments to actually kind of refresh on that for you. So say that's primarily how you would then be able to set both conditions of access just in general, and then additional levels of security access depending on what you want to apply. So say that MFA challenge, that ability to say the device has to be compliant to meet against policy, or other kind of standards as we kind of saw there. So you see the process pretty easy, relatively speaking. It obviously all kind of originates from that starting point of getting yourself that Azure AD account. But actually, once you're there, the ability to start to add these capabilities in is pretty quick, and similar kind of experience to what you'll be used to from management of groups and other aspects like that within your Azure AD.
So within that Azure AD, so one of the things was about securing administrative privilege, because I can see a lot of damage being done very easily by somebody just clicking.
Yep.
How can you control who has access to which sections? So you might want somebody to be able to configure apps, but not be able to do anything with Exchange Online, etc.
Yeah.
How's it controlled?
So very similar to in terms of the whole role-based access and kind of creation of those administrational roles. Actually, that's a very nice segue for then the next piece, which is then also going further to take those administrational roles and then control what you do with them. So if I jump into then the privileged identity side and start to show you a little bit of that, it will help answer exactly that question as well. So that's not the right one. I think I've closed the button. Oh, no, there we go. Right. So this is logged on to one of the a separate demo portal as well. But what we can see, I just pinned in the Azure AD Privileged Identity Manager. So if I go through to this, this is starting to give me visibility around the administrational and access control sets that we've got. And so you've got a few different options there. I can activate my roles. In this context, I've got set up with effectively God mode, right, in terms of security admin, global admin, privileged role admin, and I'm permanently assigned those roles. What we can do though is start to take a look at, well, actually, how does that sit within the rest of the organization? So what are the privileged roles that are set up? So you can see I've got one alert, I've got too many global admins, we've got 10 people that are currently assigned in with that. But if I take a quick look at, well, actually, what do the privilege roles look like? And so you've got a wide range of administrational access types. So the idea here is to be able to kind of say, are we just going to be the Exchange administrator? Going to be the kind of different global administrator, Intune service, mailbox, different sides. So you can start to effectively kind of preset out, depending on what type of role your user is needing to do. They can obviously have multiple ones of these, and depending on how you tier it, you can give them access to that. But again, similarly in terms of the nature of setting up your administrational roles within what you would expect on AD, it's the same effective process. So you can have a wide range of different administrational roles. You can also then set up for the different sides the types of alerts that you want to get. So are my admins not using that? Don't require for different aspects in terms of that. But different aspects of how you want to be alerted for just some of the general settings, and access reviews as well. So you can say on a regular basis, I want to be emailed to remind me that I need to review what my access profile is, and start to come back in here and start to check. Well, actually, how are all the roles assigned? Who is using? Who's done what, and all that kind of good stuff. But if I click back in and went into, say, the global admin role and took a quick look, you can start to see that actually got my main list of global admins, and say I've got kind of provisioning user 3, and currently that individual is kind of permanently assigned that capability. It's pretty easy then to just say, well, actually, they still need that role, but I don't want them to have a permanent assignment of that, so I'm going to make them eligible for it. And that effectively just resets their permissions to kind of require that individual to then request that role to be assigned to them, but they have the ability to do that. And that really is governed through the quick process of management against that role type. So in the role, I can then go in and start to configure the settings. Relatively simplistic in that sense, but fundamentally what you're allowed to do is have a maximum activation. So it either starts at an hour, but maxes out at 3 days, basically into the 72-hour mark. It's obviously at your discretion what you feel is the appropriate time to give them. Or even half an hour, if it was actually an hour as well. So they're half an hour to 72 hours. And as I say, if an individual is assigning themselves that roles, you can set up email notifications to say they've activated or a global admin role has been activated. You can even say that I want a ticket to enable me to that. And also say that actually going through the process of requiring activation for that role, they have an MFA challenge. Now, I'm going to have to I think I need to change the settings on MFA on this, don't I? Because it's going to call the wrong person. But if I take a look at that, and that's effectively then say the kind of the primary way of seeing the privileged identity and privileged roles. If I went then into one of those provisioning users that are only eligible to request to see what the actual experience for your teams would be, then this would be under provisioning user 1. And you'd start to see that actually I kind of pre-pulled up just kind of a user details. And if I went into that to say I need to reset their password, then actually you can start to see, well, I don't actually have access to understand when that user's been signing in or what that user's been doing, but also I don't have the ability to go and reset that user's password. So I don't have that administrational privilege to do that. So if I go, right, I actually realize I need to give myself that privilege, click into the privileged identity side, I can start to say, right, I want to activate one of my roles, and I am a global admin. Now, I need to probably change the conditional access on this because it's going to call Ken. Ooh. One of the other team was here yesterday, and it's gone to his phone. Right. So, Shows you MFA though. Unfortunately, I should really probably set the MFA up for my own phone. But a verification text message is because of the side, because it's global admin, senior kind of privileged identity, we want to also ensure that is done for the right user that is requesting that. So, you know, that is going to go through the process. That would have signed me in, and let me just see if I can quickly change the conditions on that. Let's do it here. Yeah, I'll disable at the moment because I'm not set up to do that. Right, that was a bit of a schoolboy. It's a separate demo portal, is in charge. Apologies for this, bear with me a moment. Let me see if I can just disable that or change the mobile quickly. Set it up in a different side. Yeah, so rather than me messing around with this, because I'm going to have to actually go into the user, because the user sets their mobile phone devices and other bits and pieces, right? But apologies for that, I should have changed that. I realised that we left it at home yesterday. So what would have happened in that context is that you see that effectively I was able to request the eligibility. That would have promoted my access to then a global administrator, if I was in the right portal. So that would enable me to activate my role. You don't have to have the MFA challenge on it, probably take that off for next time. But you know, request activation. That request activation would have granted me that then for an hour. So you'd then seen the expiration side would have popped up with effectively an hour window. You'd have had the activate, but you also then have the deactivate. So users do also have the discretion that if it was a longer time grant or they felt they didn't need it, they can quickly go and just deactivate. You know, good practice for them to ideally get into the habit of doing, as again, you know, the minimal time window you can have, so you know, the better protected that you would need to, you would be as that. What that would have then allowed me to do would have been to go back into here and have a look at Adele and effectively then go through, and I would have then started to see the user sign-ins as you would expect, as well as then the ability to reset the password. So, you know, this would have been as per what the effectively individual would have been here. So if I went back to the AD and we say work on a basis that Arif. See, this would be the kind of view the individual have got. They've not had any logins recently, but then you start to be able to have the reset passwords, you know, and they would have been able to do that because they've been granted the associated administrational privileges. So the privileged identity management is really around, first of all, defining the actual aspects of the different administrational roles that you want to have for your organization, starting then to assign those administrational roles out to your relevant IT administrators and IT individuals, and then setting basically the way that, you know, from a working practice, say, well, actually, when you need to start to undertake an activity, maybe they're doing an exchange administration, so they want it for 24 hours. Maybe it's something where, you know, they're going to go in and do a certain specific activity, so they only need it for a short time window. They can then request that, undertake the activity that needs that privileged identity, and then you've got confidence that even if they don't rescind it themselves, it will naturally come back down from that as well. is there any questions on that? And I'll sort of fix it in the
Very
meantime.
typical. Which license is it in?
So this, from the Azure-based services, is the E5 component of EM&S, or you would have to buy the P2 component of Azure AD Premium. So it is the more advanced licensing bundle of that. Or you do have the MIM service where you can do this for similar on-premise side, but for the Azure based services, it is the P2 component of the EM&S, so the E5. So we'll quickly go through the license in the end to make sure we can clarify that, because I appreciate it's a bit of a beast. I used to be a licensing consultant for my sins, so unfortunately I know how painful that is. But we can certainly go through and just kind of give you a clear view, because obviously an important thing to say with this is these can all be great, but commercially if they're not realistic for you, then start with what you can